Okay, can everybody hear us now okay? Just get a thumbs up, put a comment in the chat. Yes, you can hear us now. Okay, no worries. I can do my opening. That's absolutely fine. So I was just opening it up by saying that our employee resource groups are such a powerful space for inclusion and belonging. And we really want to make sure that that feeling of being really connected and feeling included isn't just felt in the ERG space, but is also felt right across the company. And so I opened up the first question to Tolu and Johannes as co-chairs of the AFB Ethnic Leaders Forum, which is about connecting ERG leaders from across different sectors in engineering. And I'm asking Tolu what inspired this creation and what kind of challenges or opportunities they've seen emerge from bringing together these co-chair leaders. Over to you, Tolu.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot, Amanda. Yes, I think when this group kicked off in 2020, towards the end of 2020, when I remember where I was at the time, running with my BRG or our BRG in the company, and having had conversations with various other leaders who were running their BRGs at the time, it ultimately appeared that even as ERG leaders, we also needed a network because a lot of the ERG leadership roles, while they're very influential in providing insights and progress in the respective organizations, they can be quite a lonely place sometimes, especially when it feels like either not as much progress is being made as we would like, or we feel like we're having to do all that work ourselves. So I came across that there was a clear need, I think, to create a dedicated space for ERG leaders to connect, to share experiences with one another, but ultimately create a shot of energy again back in the room and create an opportunity for us to amplify our collective impact. Understanding that we work in isolation, sometimes within our own organization, actually creating this network allowed us to come together to discuss various issues that we were facing, but also allowed us to collaborate and share ideas, best practices, so we could take that back to our organization. When you talk around the challenges, I can remember very, very clearly that the one thing that everyone sort of spoke about was the pressure on volunteers to have to juggle their BRG work alongside full-time roles without adequate support, which was starting to cause a strain on leaders. And that network provided an opportunity for us to leverage that collective brain, if you want to call it, to drive initiatives back in the organization and change the conversations around BRGs, right? Ultimately evolving from not just BRGs being social groups where people can come together, have a tea and a coffee, but also to actually drive change within the organizations, almost strategic partners to influence recruitment and policy decisions. And ultimately, that was what led us into the idea of measuring belonging and data and seeing how we could start to use that to drive some change in the organization. So that would probably be what I would say and kick off with at this stage. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Johannes, anything to add there? I know obviously from you as a researcher, you're all about the data as well. And I know that the group has been really instrumental in setting up the index as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, the group's been really, really helpful to that. I'll come to that, I guess. But onto the question around like some of the struggles and challenges and opportunities. I think I just want to reaffirm what Tolu said there last, because I think it's really important. It's really about the sort of the burden on the chairs and the volunteers within these ERGs, because I think it can't get mentioned enough, and I think really that's something that I think we organizations should really take home. It's like how much is being put on the chair and the organization itself to implement diversity and inclusion policies, ideas, or even just create a inclusive cultural environment, and how much are those responsibilities being given to somebody who's a named individual with a job role specifically for that, so people don't have to give up the roles that they're doing, etc., or do extra work beyond their role. I think that's one of the key things that did come through quite a lot early on within the group. I think just a quick list, some of the other things really about sort of uneven resourcing, data inconsistency. As you say, data has been one of those big points. And so just to come on to that point is a lot of organizations really do start there, and a lot of ERGs really do start there as well. They're trying to understand what is going on with recruitment. Why is it that sort of ethnic minorities, members of staff might not be in higher positions within an organization? And the answers really do lie within the data very early on. And so trying to get that data and be as transparent on it as possible with your ERG and then with the entire organization is really vital and is key. The opportunities of this sort of network has been great because, as you say, the EI is something that came out of it, which is we had lots of conversations and we've been having lots of conversations. I think Tolu was one of the people, I was one of those people who was like, how can we sort of, or lots of organizations are saying they're doing it, but how can we make sure that they're actually doing it? How can we get a badge to show the people who are doing well and the ones who are just on their way and on the journey? How do we actually really rank this rather than just everyone saying we've got a diversity and inclusion statement? And the community and people themselves, particularly around at AFE, our community of engineers from minority ethnic backgrounds, know which organizations have good reputations and which don't have such good organizations. And so we wanted to really be able to help organizations on one hand sort of understand where they are within their journey, help them be a bit transparent and say, look, we're at the beginning of our journey, we're in the middle of our journey. Actually, we've got something really good to show because we've actually been on this journey for a while. And I think it is really about that honest conversation, because I think that is what really inspires a lot of ethnic minority engineers to work within this field, when they quite often you are going to be one of the only people from your background, from your kind, from your area in that room. And so if you know you've got an organization that don't just say the things that they have to say about diversity and inclusion, but they back it up, they have an ERG, a well-sponsored ERG, and they have the data available, and they do something like the engineering ethnicity index, which is an index which is about looking at your processes, seeing where you are within those processes and how far you are on to making commitments to diversity inclusion, starting to do the work on diversity inclusion, or having something to show for diversity inclusion. Yeah, I'll probably talk about a bit about that later on today as well.
Yeah, fab. Thank you, Johannes. Jill, I'm going to come over to you. Obviously, you're coming to this from the EDI angle, and you've worked across industries leading on D&I. From your perspective, how have ERGs evolved over the years, and looking at how they're presenting right now? Why are they becoming such an integral part of inclusion strategies today, and how can we really build them for success?
Thanks, Amanda. Yes, so when I first started working in this area, a lot of the ERGs that I was working with were more sort of just support organisations for their members, and they were a bit. Some of them, not all of them, were a bit like talking shops, or sessions for people just to get together and have a bit of a moan. From a business perspective, what I've seen change and what has been really beneficial, both for the ERGs and for the businesses themselves, is the ERGs moving away from that. So yes, their key role is around supporting their members. That is still very much of a key role, but also now they're getting more involved in the D&I strategic goals of organisations and working with people to help engender the change that we're looking for within organisations. Some of the things we've done in Balfour Beatty, our gender network, work very closely with our site mobilisation team and our property team around site facilities, not just from a gender perspective, because they also engaged with our disability network as well. So from an accessibility perspective as well, and really worked with the business to make sure that what we were providing was what people actually needed and wanted as well. So that's how they've developed, and I've seen them develop over the years.
Yeah. Jill, I'm going to stay with you. In your experience, what separates those really successful, thriving ERGs from those that maybe struggle to sustain momentum, especially from your perspective being on the outside, but within that EDI bubble?
For me, the successful ERGs are the ones that really engage with their members and really understand what their members want, and then engage with the business as well. So it's having some strong people who are leading the ERGs, who can do that engagement, but also people who are, how can I put this? They're aware that just because you can't do everything as a business. Yeah. So it's being realistic about what things can be done and how can and what can be done now, what might need to be done in the future. So being realistic about the expectations as well.
And I wonder also, and I'll open this up across the floor, the role of the sponsor in also being an ally for the ERG, I think is often a really essential role that can be overlooked. I'd be interested to hear, Tolu and Johannes, across the breadth of the ERGs that you have engagement with, where you see the successful ones maybe that have more engagement or not. I'd be interested to hear when it comes to that leadership buy-in with the sponsors and so on.
Yep, happy to go first. I think from the time we've spent in the Ethnic Leaders Forum and the network, what you tend to see in terms of what sets aside ERGs that are successful, if you want to put it that way, or have the most engagement, is the leadership buy-in. I think you could see a lot of ERGs have the ground root support in terms of network of people who are really engaged, who are really energized, but then that conversation doesn't really find its way into the business metrics and KPIs. I think those ERGs that are really successful have a really strong executive sponsor, so someone who is quite senior in the company, who has the ability to use their influence to bring conversations like these into rooms where conversations around business policies and strategies are being held, but also someone who has a passion for, one, creating a more inclusive organization naturally, but I think two, developing leaders as well, because a lot of these ERGs, usually leaders who come into that role are come in first of all because of the desire to want to drive change, but in many cases may not have had the exposure to leadership yet, which in my experience, and I think in the experience of a few other leaders, it actually creates a huge opportunity for you to start to think outside of just the group, think about how it can make the business better, right? So I think having an executive sponsor, and in some ways a board like we had in BP of other senior leaders who we called a governance board spread across the different entities of the business, allowed us to be able to share as an ERG our collective insights on where we think opportunities are for improvement and what we can do to actually move the dial or move the needle on inclusion. But then having those leaders take that feedback on board and actually then drive a change in the organization started to create the momentum I think we needed to see lots of change in policy and in culture. So I can give a specific example, right? We kicked off anti-racism training called Race for Equity back in 2021. And the only reason we were able to see that have the impact it did was the engagement of the leaders lining up with our people and culture organization or HR at the time and driving a global campaign to ultimately run this and put in the minds of employees, make it mandatory, but also have the right level of comms that sort of back that. So I think it's important for any BRG to succeed. Ultimately, it's a business resource group or an employee resource group, however we want to see it. It is there in support of the business, but the business as well should be there in support of the group. And then when you have that synergy between the group and the business, you can start to see really, really strong things happening, and the needle really start to move on inclusion in the organization.
And I guess also the element of how we're empowering our co-chairs in their role. I've been slowly making my way around to meeting all the co-chairs within all of our corporate partners in the last few months. And I'm struck that we have some very new co-chairs within some of our partners who are still early in their careers. And so as they advocate for themselves and for others, I'm mindful perhaps of some training, perhaps of how we're supporting them for maybe a training opportunity. I don't know if we've seen across the network, Johannes and Tolu, instances of best practice around training up, especially new co-chairs.
I'll go for that and give Taylor a little break. In terms of training, I think we had lots of conversations around this, and I think the network itself can act as that sort of arena, and it has done for a lot of new chairs. To be fair, there are nowadays more and more organizations starting to turn to and look to training up and working with ERGs, but we've been around for a little while, and really is that peer-to-peer support, which I think is really important and you can really get from a network like ours. Of course, there are, like I say, lots of different organizations, diversity inclusion organizations that do ERG training. You come to a talk like this, of course, and learn a lot more about ERGs. But I think that some of those training courses can be really good and really effective. But I think the thing about it is you really want to think about the context of your organization and the unique culture that your organization has and how your BRG or ERG is going to work or fit within that.
Yeah.
And I think with a network like ours, I guess what it gives you a chance to do is speak to other people who are going through similar challenges, but they're not obviously going to be identical, but you can definitely learn and you'll have transferable experiences that you'll be able to take away with you and try things out, because a lot of time it is about trying things out. And so, yeah, I think
Yeah,
just a nice
fab.
short answer
Thank
for that
you.
one.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear, Tolu, within the forum, have we seen examples of ERGs that have really helped to shift the culture or policy within their organizations? You were giving a couple of examples there earlier. I wonder if you could speak on that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Amanda. I normally will be biased to the work BP have done because I'm very much in that lens. But I think we've seen some really good work from companies like Leonardo, Baker Hughes, Tetra Tech, and a few other organizations in their spirit energy. I can think of with Baker Hughes, a lot of what was done at the early stages when we started to share best practice was around data and mandatory data collection. And I think conversations we had in there in the sessions over the months sort of fed into that conversation around capturing data and I guess what's the word, measuring data through sort of self declaration, right? And it was through those conversations and tips that were shared that we started to see progress in the company in that case. I think for Leonardo it was more around driving greater engagement across their various hubs and strategies around sort of focusing on specific individual lived experiences of various strands of diversity, which they were doing, but then looking around organizing more intersectional, based conversations, we tried to drive a bit of progress. But without necessarily delving into, I guess, too much, I think what we started to see from the conversations we were having was actually sharing best practice and cross collaborating, and then hearing over the next few months or years in some cases how those conversations have started to turn to real actionable conversation. And I think with Tetra Tech, they were one of the first adopters of the ethnicity engineering index, and getting that feedback from the work they had done also then fed into what we could do with other companies. So I think there's been a few success stories which might still have happened all the same, but I think being part of that Ethnic Leaders Network definitely accelerated action in those areas.
Brilliant, fantastic, thank you. So obviously our ERG roles are, for the vast majority, a voluntary role, and we touched upon this earlier. How can we really make sure that our staff, our people of colour, and those with lived experience from an intersectional lens, of course, aren't shouldering the full weight of an organisation's inclusion work on top of their day jobs. I'm going to open that up across the floor.
Do you want me to come in on that one then,
Go
Amanda?
on. Go for it, Jill.
Yeah, so obviously my role in Balfour Beatty is partly to help and support all of our ERGs, but not all organisations are big enough and have the actual capacity to have somebody in this sort of role. So there, I think it's absolutely key that the networks that or ERGs that an organisation have work together, so that they don't work in silos, so that they can support each other. There's a lot of initiatives and things that the networks want to do that are going to cross over and are going to be relevant, whatever the theme of the network actually is. And it's looking after each other as well, asking that question, are you okay? No, are you really okay? And looking to really support people, in that role. We're lucky in that Balfour Beatty, being the size of the organisation that we are, we do give our co-chairs, and each of our networks have 4 co-chairs, sometime each month that they can book towards the role of being a co-chair. And we also acknowledge the fact that people's day jobs take precedent, and the amount of work that they have in their day job will fluctuate. So there are going to be times that somebody might need to take a step back. And having 4 co-chairs for each network means that there's still that capacity to allow people to do that, to say, hold their hand up and say, I'm going to have to take a step back for a few months, and then come back in. So I think there's lots of things that can be done within any organisation to help and support people in the roles.
Brilliant. And I think that also lends itself to the work around psychological safety within the organisation, that people can say, I'm struggling, I have too much on my plate here, and they feel that they're able to say that within the organisation as well. Tolo, Johannes, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I suppose I think Joe done a great job there. I just add to that, I think recognition, I suppose, is one of those main key things. I think you should try, like you say, your best to not shoulder the weight and really use a BRG or ERG as what it's there for, which is to support organizational function in terms of diversity and inclusion. And in many other areas, actually, a BRG or ERG can actually help and support. But it's for them to understand when they come to these sessions with ideas and to be able to help and contribute, but not necessarily to have to take on the burden of work or anything that comes out of it, unless they, 1, choose to, and 2, can be recognized for that work. I think also, sometimes chairs of ERGs and some of the people that we've had come in are really quite young and they're early on in their careers, which is really, it's a great thing to see. And it's a great opportunity for them to actually work at a level where they're speaking directly with senior leaders, setting targets and working with that level. So see it as a great opportunity, but also make sure that the young person in that role understands the opportunity that they get, and make sure that they're taking that all down, adding it to their CVs, and that as an organization, you recognize that if this person is actually working in a role where they're helping to have transformational change of your organization, it needs to be recognized, and actually they need to be either through remunerations or during their appraisal process. It's not like an add-on, that diversity and inclusion thing that you do. It's actually something that's a central function and has had a massive impact, and it needs to be recognized in that way. So that's all I'll add.
Absolutely. We have some amazing younger advocates who are doing amazing work across our partners right now. I see so much of their passion and commitment around this, and it really fuels them. And again, when we think about that leader buy-in in supporting them, their line managers and so on, to make sure that they're not burning out, I think is really essential. We, of course, have ERGs across the breadth of different identities. Jill, what have you found effective in helping them collaborate? I think often they're quite siloed and operate quite separately. Have you seen more examples in where those different ERGs are able to collaborate together?
Yeah, so one of the things I do is get all of the co-chairs from all of our ERGs together sort of 3 times a year. And one of those meetings is about their plans for the following year. And it's sharing about those plans that actually helps identify areas as to where they can work together. Some of the things that they have done is our multicultural network has worked with our LGBTQ plus network to really talk about sexual orientation in different cultures and raise awareness about that. Other things are where our neurodiversity and our disability network have come together. And we have recently taken on co-pilot across Balfour Beatty. So they've been working together with the comms team to look at the accessibility features and how co-pilot can actually help individuals who may need adaptive software or whatever actually be more effective in their role. So it's identifying those things or topics that the networks can come together and work together on. And then they're supporting each other as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking from the Ethnic Leaders Forum perspective, how can we make sure that our HR and our leadership teams are better connecting with our ERGs, just to really make sure that we're broadening out so that the elements of the people strategies and those business strategies are really being embedded, so that that sense of belonging isn't just taken on board within the ERG, but is seen as everybody's responsibility?
Yes, I think that's a really good question. I think HR organizations actually have a unique opportunity, I would say, to harness the collective data, if you want to call it that, ERGs provide, because ERGs give you a pulse of the organization, especially as it comes to belonging, in a way that I don't think, and this is my opinion, any other process you have gives you. I think because ERGs have done a lot over time to create a safe space and safe environment where people can actually speak about how they feel, they provide much more realistic data of the temperature in a company versus, you know, sort of company-led pulse results and surveys that they do. And I think if HRs sort of see ERG insights as business intelligence, they will be able to actually better connect the ERG insights to broader business or people strategy, especially as it relates to sort of recruitment, as it relates to inclusion, as it relates to promotion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And
so of course, retention.
And retention. That, I think that was the final word I was looking for. I had a bit of brain fog there. So 100%. I think HR organizations can actually use ERGs and partner with them, right, as a thought partner to really drive that. And the sort of symbiotic relationship could then be that what HR organizations could do is really give ERGs and ERG leaders some opportunities for them to also develop themselves, right? Because I think ERGs provide a really good opportunity. I'll call it a sort of talent or leadership incubator, because you have people like, you know, like we say, who generally start either early careers or you know, people who join because they're really passionate, but they have then the opportunity to really look at an organization and drive organizational change, talk about strategy. How are we going to deliver X, Y, and Z? What are going to be our key performance indicators for showing that we've done that? So it creates an opportunity for actually ERG leaders to become future leaders in the company, while in the same place in the same breath giving HR insights that they can use to drive strategy. I think the other thing HR and leadership teams can do as well is, and it's always quite difficult, and I do understand it, but as much as possible to try and make the data that they're collecting transparent and make it actionable. Make it clear to the organization where the gaps exist and what we're doing to close those gaps, and make it visible as well to the leaders so they can see where the gaps can exist and engage with the ERGs to, again, co-develop solutions. So I think combination, just to round it up, a combination of three things is, engage with the ERGs and use the ERGs as business intelligence in many ways. Create opportunities for ERG leaders, again, through your HR processes to gain really useful development experience, because that will just translate into more succession for your ERGs. And third, make the data transparent, make it actionable, and create opportunities for feedback loops to be organized between leaders and ERGs.
And of course, Johannes, you're Dr. Data in my book. Last year, we collaborated around our best practice for data collection. And of course, sometimes maybe that is an opportunity that is missed by some organizations in really utilizing and galvanizing our ERGs to advocate for that data collection. Johannes, I know we've seen across the breadth of our partners different rates of completion, and for those that have higher completion rates, we often see where the ERGs are very much embedded. Has that been your experience, Johannes?
Yeah, no, I'm a bit thrown off still with the Dr. Data. I mean, I like data, but I'm not sure I'm Dr. Data, to be fair. I'm sure there's plenty more people qualified in analyzing data in the audience than I am. But thank you. Yeah, no, I think ERGs, as we did speak about last year, and as continues to be the case within conversations we're having within a network on a monthly basis, are one of those key forums and really encouraging and supporting organizations to really increase. And we've seen some real great examples of this. Like, we've seen some organizations getting up to the 90%, like high 90s in terms of declaration, which I'm like, whoa, that was mind blowing, to be fair. I'm quite impressed at 80. So and really ERGs can do that job in terms of really explaining to people at a ground level, peer to peer, why it is an organization is collecting data and how that data is going to be used, but also building that trust, right? A lot of time it's sort of, do I believe you're actually going to take this data and actually make actions on it? Are you actually an organization that I really believe is committed to diversity and inclusion? I really do think organizations should look at their disclosure data and really use that as an indication as to how well our staff trust us in regards to diversity and inclusion. Because it's a great example where most people understand that organizations collect data for diversity and inclusion purposes. So if they're not giving it to you, it's either you have a bunch of staff who are against diversity and inclusion, which I doubt is the case. It's more a lot of staff who actually aren't confident that you're going to look after the data well, that you've asked them multiple times, they've given it to you and you keep losing it, or you're doing something wrong with the system, or they really just don't believe that you're actually making the efforts to actually improve on diversity and inclusion. And so really you do have to make a role of winning people over, and your ERG is going to be one of those great ways and a great forum where you could have some frank conversations off the record, business conversations about how people find the culture and what needs to be done within the culture in order to boost those declaration rates up.
Yeah, and that's looping back to Tolu's point there around those business perspectives and that amazing insight. Moving on, Jill, at Balfour Beatty, have you seen, or how have you managed to translate the insights from the ERGs and the collaborations there into any real cultural or policy shifts? And how can you make sure that those voices are heard at senior levels?
Yes, so we've done quite a lot of work around that over the last few years. So we've had a couple of senior leader listening sessions where representatives of our networks have met with our CEO, have met with our board chair, to share what they are working on and to really galvanise their support in what they're looking to do. We also have a bi-monthly DEI working group, and all of the networks, our ERGs, are represented at that and feed through into the decision making that's made at that working group. But other things that we do, for example, we're currently reviewing our general e-learning for everybody across the company, and all of the networks have been invited to take part in reviewing the content and what's involved in that. So there are lots of other ways that the networks are getting involved across the whole company. I also encourage all of my HR peers to invite the networks in to help them when they're looking at policies and involvement in that. And one of the things, obviously, I've got my Right to Respect background, and I can't not talk about our Right to Respect programme, which is all about behaviour and the culture of inclusion. And all the way through the development of that programme, again, all of the networks, all of our ERGs had representation and were consulted on the content within that programme. So it's really involving them at the highest level in what we're doing within the business.
Yeah, and that's something Tolu also touched upon, that co-design element and moving the voice. It's great to have your voice within the ERG, but making sure that it's that wider influence as well, I think is really powerful. And that ability to co-design or co-create, I think, is so essential. Yeah. So I'm going to open this up across the board. What does success look like now for ERGs? Thinking forward, what would we love to see happen? For those that maybe, there are some people on this call where maybe their ERGs are still in their infancy. They're in maybe slightly smaller companies. What does success look like for you?
If I dive in there, sorry, I just like that question. I think it's going to vary, right? And like you say, it's going to vary by which stage your ERG is at, how your organization operates and works, and sort of where it works in many ways. But I think success generally sort of, like it's a developing thing. It's like I say, it's going to be changing actually. What you're going to set up with your ERG, you're going to say, okay, set out a bunch of like plans that you want to do, achieve those plans, think this is success, and then you're going to see a lot of our plans. I'm minded of the Nelson Mandela quote of, I climbed to the top of the mountain and I found out there's more mountains to climb, essentially. And I think that is what you will see with our ERG, and not necessarily in a bad way, but just we're always looking to improve, and there's always good things that you can do and quality you can add. And when you're talking about what does success look like for the ERG, you're also talking about what does success look like for the business, and how does the ERG contribute to that? What strategic role can your ERG play within that? Whether it is around people strategy, or whether it is also about inclusive design, right? If you are an organization that are producing for the public, are you thinking about how people within your organization with different life experiences who might not work directly within specific delivering teams you might be able to run things past, use them as like internal focus groups. There's lots of different ways that you could work with your ERG and make use of your ERG. When my ERG, which I chair, started, we started out looking at one set of areas, and we continue to look at those different areas, but we've developed into how we look at them and the ways in which we work, and that's the sort of thing that's going to work. So I think what success is going to look like for you is, I think mostly when you're able to get it well functioning, when the burden isn't too much on the chairs or on the people, and when it's working in tandem within the organization, that's when it's going to be the most successful. But what you're doing is going to change all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Ever evolving. Anything else to add?
Yeah,
I think from my perspective, sorry, Tolu. I think a successful ERG is one that's got engaged members, that people want to be part of, want also not just to be part of the network, part of the group, but to be actively involved in what the network is trying to do and trying to achieve. So it's not just about increasing the numbers, it's increasing the numbers of people who are actively engaged. And And I think it's from a business perspective, it's having that recognition of all the things that we've been talking about how the networks can actually help the business move things forward, so that the business people across the business, whatever it is, are actively going to the networks to seek their help, to seek their thoughts, their understanding, and using the great experience and knowledge that is contained within the networks across the business. And I think that's a real sort of recognition of success, where the networks have taken that step to being more strategic and more aligned within the business as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We were at the AFB Graduate Roadshow last week, meeting the next generation of engineers about to go into industry. And we recently also had our a session around employing that next generation, or Gen Z engineers. And we're aware so much, of course, of that sense of advocacy and social conscience within the Gen Z population. And I think it'll be an interesting time for the ERGs as we have this new influx of Gen Z staff across our ERGs, to see how much that new energy as well that they bring in. So I'm going to open this up across the way. We have touched upon leadership a couple of times. We've spoken about the sponsor and making sure that they're not just a sponsor on paper, that they're also engaged and acting as active allies. I wonder how we can really think about that role of leadership in supporting and empowering. Jill, you were talking about the listening groups there for our ERGs. What are the next steps in making sure that our leaders are absolutely those champions and allies for our ERGs?
So one of the things that we do is we actually rotate our exec sponsors. So that, and we do the same for our co-chairs, in that people are only actually in post for a maximum of 3 years, and then they move on. So it means that it's not just one person. So from an exec sponsor perspective, they may lose engagement level, shall we say, after too long, and moving them on that way. And I think it's about how important is this within any organisation. Now, again, at Balfour's, we're lucky in that we have DEI built into our cultural framework and the way that we behave. One of our core behaviours is called value everyone. And that is why we call our DEI strategy our value everyone strategy. But again, not all organisations are like that, and it's how you can get that built into just how you behave and what you do, I think is quite key.
Yeah, absolutely. Tulu, I'll hand over to you on that.
Yeah, I think I've spoken a bit on this already, and I think the first thing is you want someone who's passionate, who's active, and who is willing to use their influence. I think what I've found is where you have executive sponsors who also may not necessarily share the lived experience of that group, but have the ability to really drive change with what will seem to be maybe very little social cost to yourself. I think we see a lot of power in there, because on one hand, it's a service, I guess, in some ways to the ERG, where the executive sponsor is not also feeling the weight of that lack of belonging or inclusion or exclusion, but they're also actually able to listen without judgment, to suspend judgment, to really take in the information they're hearing from the ERGs, always asking, how can I be a better ally? How can I be a better sponsor? How can I support you better? And actually really having that sort of servant leadership to sort of take the concerns of the BRG out into the organization and drive change. So I think for me, the role of leadership is critical. It's what changes a BRG from being a talking shop, like Jill aptly mentioned, to a strategic partner of the business and actually driving change. It will start to create sort of things like, creating space for BRG leaders to actually have time, to do the work. So it's not the 100%, the 10% on top of the 100%. It's more like the 20% in addition to the 80% of your work, where it is actually woven into the fabric of what you do in the company, as opposed to something you have to do on the side. It's what drives leadership and line management to actually actively support you. So again, you don't feel like you're having to take time off work to do this D&I thing, right? And with that sort of type of change over time, it becomes the fabric of the company, because it shows to the external facing world. And as Johannes said, especially for companies whose consumers kind of look at what you're doing, it shows you that this is the kind of company we want to be. This is how important inclusion is to us. And if you ask our BRGs, hopefully you're getting the same answer. And I think that's where you really kind of want to get to as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm coming to our last question. We've whizzed by today, and you've all provided such amazing, interesting insights. So thank you for that. If you could leave our audience now with one piece of advice, and our audience are going to be people who maybe are co-chairs, maybe they're the lead, maybe they're in D&I, maybe they're a senior sponsor. What's one action that they can take to help the ERGs to truly shape the culture and drive inclusion right now?
I'll go first. We live in a changing world. And I think the key thing for me is we're all learning every day. And to accept that we're all learning and that things change, and that we need to embrace how things are changing. And just because it was like this a few years ago doesn't mean it's like that now. And I think that that's really important for everyone involved in the D&I space. I've been specialising in this for far too many years than I'd really like to talk about. But I'm still learning every day. And I think that's my advice, is be open to that learning.
Absolutely. Johannes?
Oh, that's brilliant. I just want to still Jill's one and just say be open to learning.
We'll all still Jill.
But yeah, I think be intentional, I suppose. And I think that is something that applies across the board, whether you are a chair, or whether you're a sponsor, or if you're a leader, CEO, etc. at the organization. Really be intentional about what it is you're trying to do. If it's about diversity, inclusion, and improving that, and actually creating a culture of inclusion within your organization, think about what it is you're doing. You can't really afford just to fall back into like just habits and just doing stuff. You have to really think about, why am I doing these sorts of things? And when it comes to sort of, if you're a sponsor, it's quite easy sometimes to take that position, or not just easy, actually, you could feel a pressure to sort of, oh, okay, I know that, or I have a feeling that organizations are never going to change this, so I need to push back on what the ERG are asking for and say, and temper expectations. Be imaginative, right? Say, go with them sometimes, go with the flow and say, okay, I don't think this will work, but let's think about how it could work theoretically and how it would work. Let people be heard, let people be felt. Similarly, if you're a chair, sorry, I'm taking a bit long, but if you're a chair, similarly, be intentional about the work you're doing. Don't just go along on a day-to-day basis of organizing meetings, as Joe said, turn things into a talking shop. What do you want to achieve from that talking shop? If you're a co-chair, you have a quite important role. It is a bit of pressure because you're leading, actually, and people's career opportunities can really be impacted by the work that you do within that space. So really be intentional about how you use that time when you do have your meetings, and how you take things from that meeting to the next level. And as a leader, be intentional in making sure you're showing that you actually support, that you're actively listening, and not trying to lead this on the ERG, but you're willing to be advised and led by it as well. I think be intentional about all those types of things.
Brilliant. Thank you. Tolu?
Yeah, I think for me, if you're a leader, I think it's for me, it's two things. Being a person who's passionate about inclusion and belonging, it's just the right thing to do, first of all, to bring people together, share lived experiences, and understand the perspectives of people who might be different from you. I think the other thing as a leader you need to realize is actually, the data is there, and it's been there for years. You have a more inclusive organization, you're going to be more successful, right? There is no two ways about it. You to create a high performing team, you need to be able to understand what makes you tick, and try and leverage the strengths of other people. So it is the right thing to do, but it's also a really good imperative for a business, right? And I think my last piece of advice, if you're an ERG lead, right, it can feel sometimes that the journey is long. And I think, as Jill said, D&I continues to evolve, and we will continue to evolve with it. In some ways, it's linked to the external environment, and sometimes that can be a good thing. Sometimes it might be challenging, but I think the key point, and Johannes and I will tell you, you're not alone. There are a lot of us in the network who feel exactly the same way. But what we have definitely found, when it comes down to it, it's ultimately good to be part of a network and a group where you can actually just create a safe space and share what's on your mind. So shameless plug, if you are an ERG lead, please reach out to the network. We're still looking for more people, and the group is growing, right? So I think erg@afbe.org.uk is the email address, and we'd love to see as many of you as possible, and look forward to continue to learn from each other, and hopefully take those learnings back to our respective organizations.
Absolutely. Good plug. You beat me to it there, Tolu. We have a few minutes where we can do some questions. Equally, when we think about network, I'm also going to shamelessly plug our upcoming AFB Awards, which are happening in Aberdeen on November 6th. And it is a great opportunity to meet other people within the industry. I shall pop the link in the chat in one moment. If you want any information about the Ethnic Leaders Forum, the awards, and Zara, if you can also share on the screen our last remaining talks for Black History Month, please do get in touch. We all like a good chat, so feel free to drop us a line. Any questions, anyone, feel free to either pop it in the chat or unmute yourself. If not, have a great rest of the day.
You can unmute yourself, I believe.
Can everyone see this okay?
Yes, I think so. I think we have a hand up as well.
Yeah, so if everyone thank you so much for coming along to this, but we have 2 more talks left for the rest of October, so we would love it if you could pop along. The QR codes here, if you scan them with your phone, it should take you directly to the Eventbrite page, and if you sign up, we will pop you through on a calendar link.
It looks like there's a question from Tegwin there. Yeah, I think she's unable.
Yes, I'm okay. I can speak now. Gosh, that was such a great session. I just got so much out of it. Thank you so much. I'm an engineer. I work in offshore wind, and I'm an ERG chair of an ERG for people with disabilities. So it's really challenging being this chair. One of the questions I wanted to ask was, does any of your networks have diversity and inclusion or HR reps coming into the network? There are people with those characteristics which the network represents, and there are other people who come in. They don't have those particular characteristics. They don't come in as an ally, but they come in as part of their business role. Does that happen to you, and how do you view it? Is it a helpful thing? Is it an unhelpful thing?
I, sorry, do you want to go to Tony? Okay, cool. I think it will depend quite a lot on like I say, the nature of the organization. If it is like a very helpful and supportive HR team, and you have a very helpful and supportive relationship, then I think you will that have be able to work in that sort of situation. But I do think there are some times where like people within in some roles might put protecting the business and reputation ahead of perhaps the people. And where that is happening, obviously that's unfortunate. And ways around it. It really is going to be around conversation and bringing in the relevant people involved to be able to have the conversation and say, look, this is what we're trying to achieve with this ERG. It's actually here to support the business organization. And actually, people are more able to speak and be speak more frankly when people who are not in said roles are within the room. However, what we can do is make sure that we're taking down information and bringing the relevant information to the correct people afterwards. And that's my role as chair to do, basically. And trying to have that sort of reasonable conversation, and trying to find support where you can, allyship where you can, in order to have that conversation in the best and most sort of productive way for the organization and for yourself. Of course, you have to make sure you take care of yourself.
I can maybe quickly add a quick thought on this. One thing we started to do towards the during my time in the role, we set up listening lounges, and what we did with these sessions was create an opportunity for people to speak. It might either be linked to something that might have happened outside or a specific topic. I know we had a session we ran with the Neurodiversity Network around breaking the stigma. We called it exploring the intersectionality between race and neurodivergence, which was probably one of our most powerful sessions. And I think it was one of our most powerful sessions purely because we didn't record it. While there was a lot of information in there, I think we wanted people to really come in and share their thoughts. And I think when you create those opportunities, there's less of that jeopardy or feeling, something might be misconstrued or taken a different way. But I think personally, I tend to look at opportunities where we have HR professionals or people from the business coming in to assume positive intent at first, and actually take those individuals up on their offer after that call to kind of task them as to what they can do to help. So I would see it personally as an opportunity, but I do appreciate that it can be quite sensitive sometimes, especially if you're a starting employee resource group or growing organization.
Lovely, thank you. Jazz, you just mentioned about booking onto the anti-racist toolkit. No, the sale definitely hasn't ended. It's not letting me add to the chat for some reason, but if you email corporatepartnerships@afbe.org.uk, we will sort that out for you straight away. And Zara, if you can have a look at that for me, please. I think that's it for the questions. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists today. Jill, Johannes and Tolu, thank you so much for joining us today and providing such great insights. We'll be sending this recording out to all of our partners for those who have employees who couldn't join today. And we will be able to distribute internally. As I said, we have 2 remaining talks, and we also provided that email address there as well if you want to join the Ethnic Leaders Forum. And as I said, we have our upcoming AFBE Awards on November 6th in Aberdeen, and we look forward to seeing you there. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.